Thanks very much, Ralph. That was kind, especially the promotion that you gave me. I'm not so sure my colleagues at the University of Washington would like to see me as the vice president, but I wasn't assistant vice president at the School of Medicine for almost 20 years. So thanks so much for inviting me to speak with you for a little bit today. As Ralph said, I am a washback. I grew up here in Falmouth, and Greg and I returned when we both retired in 2016. My dad was the chair of the English department at Falmouth High for almost 30 years. But it was from my mother that I developed the love for genealogy. She was the family genealogist, and she was a fantastic researcher prior to the days of the internet and digitized and indexed documents. She left a treasure trove of charts, files, notes. I've talked to some of you about this morning, artifacts, and Post-it notes. And she was a member of this society for a short period of time in the early 1970s. Her most comprehensive work, I'm already having trouble technically. Get it announced, sorry. I want to go back to the first slide. So how do I just
Scroll down. There you go.
Okay. Her most comprehensive work, however, was on my father's side of the family, uncovering a lot of roots that date back to the 1620s. In fact, here on the Cape, Massachusetts Bay Colony, Hartford, Connecticut, the founding of Hartford, and then on to New York. She had made some good progress on the Swedish side, her side, but she was somewhat limited by access to the Swedish records, not speaking Swedish, and frankly, just limited family information. That said, she again left charts, files, and notes, some extremely cryptic. And as we're going to see in this presentation, they were not all accurate. When I began doing this research, my real goal was simply to fill out my tree. I just wanted to fill my tree on this side of the family to the extent that I had been able to do it on my dad's side. But once I started, I realized, oh my gosh, there are several mysteries. There's lots of inconsistencies, and that I needed to resolve many of these things before I could proceed. So as a first step, I contacted a former colleague from the University of Washington and a friend and a former speaker to this group, Jill Morelli, for advice on best practices for doing Swedish genealogical research. Jill is an expert in many things, and one of them is in doing Swedish and Danish genealogical research. So she introduced me to Archive Digital, which is Sweden's largest and most extensive online archive of digitized original records. Today, I'm going to introduce you to these records and show you how I use them to solve one mystery in particular. And while my talk does focus on Swedish genealogy and Swedish records, I hope that it also demonstrates a kind of methodical step-by-step approach to solving a research question that is compounded by family lore. So this is a chart, a very basic chart of the maternal side of my family with me down at the bottom. All four of my maternal great-grandparents immigrated from Sweden between 1883 and 1893. This was the third and perhaps largest wave of Swedish immigrants and those from other Scandinavian countries. So again, I'm on the bottom, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and then my presumed great-grandparents. I'm going to apologize in advance for two things. I've made up my own pronunciations for some Swedish words, and there are a lot of Charlottes and Charlottas in this presentation. We will discover that there's some rationale for the repetition of the name Charlotte, Charlotta. So We had solid evidence that my great-grandmother was Ida Charlotta Lundberg, born in 1862 in Sweden, and she died in 1933 in Concord, New Hampshire. The puzzle, or to be more precise, the research question for me was, who were her parents? We had two names, Nils Lundberg as her father, but I didn't know anything more about him, that he was born in Sweden and he was a farmer. I think everybody in that time period in Sweden was a farmer. And for her mother, we had the name Charlotte Lundstedt. And this is where the family lore, the family post-it notes started to come in. All of the family notes indicated that she too was born in Sweden in 1852 and died also in Concord, New Hampshire in 1934. Additional family notes suggested that she had been married twice, first to Nils Lundberg, and second to either Ivar or Isaac Johnson. And this person, Ivar or Isaac Johnson, was also born in Sweden and died in Concord, New Hampshire. So when Jill talked to us a couple of months ago, she outlined a methodology for reviewing family lore. Is the premise acceptable? Is it relevant? And do we have the grounds or evidence to prove it? Right out of the gate, I had some trouble with the premise that this Charlotte Lundstedt was Ida Charlotta's mother. Did she really give birth at age 10? Had she really been married twice? So what did I really know about this Charlotte Lundstedt, the one born in 1852? I'll keep trying to remind you of the dates of these Charlottes because it helps keep them straight in my own mind. And what were my actual sources? So the family oral history did always refer to her as my great-great-grandmother. Not a very reliable start. Her death certificate, her interment card, her grave marker, all of these confirmed those birth and death dates, 1852 and 1934. I did confirm that she was the widow of Edwin Johnson. It turns out that the only evidence, the only proof that I had that she was my great-great-grandmother were the post-it notes that were attached to the photos and the documents in support of that oral history. So, not very reliable at all. So I decided that I had to take a step backward before I could move forward, and certainly before I could move to Sweden. So what did I really know about the younger Ida Charlotta Lundberg, the one born in 1862? She was the immigrant. Her marriage, death certificate and grave marker confirmed her birth and death dates as well, 1862 and 1933. These documents did support that her parents' names were Nils Lundberg and Charlotte Lundstedt. The 1900 census includes her husband and 5 children, and provided a handy piece of information of her immigration year, 1883. Her obituary, that tiny little notice on the far right, provided the name of her brother, Henry Lundberg of Manchester, New Hampshire. New computer, for me anyway. Okay, so I found Ida's, this is again the immigrant, her immigrant record on ancestry.com in the Sweden immigrants registered in church books, 1783 to 1991. This record actually provided some pretty crucial information to continuing my search in the Swedish records. It confirms her name, Ida Charlotta Lundberg, and does confirm that she was Nils' daughter. We're going to look at naming conventions in just a minute so that you'll see why that's so important. confirms that she was female, again, provides her birth date. This matches all of the other documents that we've had. It's starting to provide some new information for us that's going to be really helpful as we move forward. It tells me that where she was born, that she was born in the parish of Killangarrad in the county of Alsborg. Alsborg became part of Västergötland I think in the 1990s. This tells us that she was heading to America. She was a daughter, that was listed as her employment, and that she was traveling alone. So now I think we're ready to start thinking about going to Sweden. So in order to effectively use the Swedish records, there's a few key pieces of information that are actually crucial. The name of the person as it would have been in Sweden, not how they might have Americanized it when they came to the United States. And so we're pretty sure of her name as either Ida Charlotta Lundberg or Ida Charlotta Nilsdotter. Birth date, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go along, is kind of akin to a social security number in the Swedish records, so it's very helpful. And then the parish or the farm, the parish and the farm are very important as you're dealing with the Swedish records. And so we did pick up some of that information from that immigration record, the parish of Killangarrad in Alsborg. We picked up a few additional points. Her emigration date of March of 1883, an additional parish. She was born in Killangarrad, but she left Sweden from Learyd, which was also in the Alsborg county. We know her parents' names, or we're pretty sure, and we have the additional piece of information of her brother's name. But before we jump to the Swedish records, I want to talk to you for just a couple of minutes about a few sources and some background information that has been extremely helpful to me as I've done this research. I highly recommend the Family Search Wiki on Swedish genealogy. It provides lots of information, links, and tips. For example, it provides information and tutorials on the Swedish alphabet and reading the documents. Most of the documents that you're going to find use the Gothic or Old German script pictured here. And as you can see, that there's a number of variations for every single letter. Additionally, or maybe not so helpful, there are 3 additional letters in the Swedish alphabet. The A with the open circle above it, or the ring, and then the A and the O with the umlaut over on the far right. And just to keep you on your toes, they come after Z. So that's important to realize when you're looking at indexes or tables of contents. So again, we're talking about Alsborg County. Well, that comes at the very end of the list of counties. So it follows Västmanland. So you're going to find the county of Alsborg at the bottom of the list. I do promise that reading the documents gets easier with practice. And if you do, Jill offered a great course in learning different techniques for how to figure out the words in the Swedish. So I would recommend that for those that get really serious about that. But there are tutorials both on the Family Search Wiki, and then another terrific resource is the Swedish Genealogy Guide website. And all of these are listed in your handout. And then there's the naming conventions. It wasn't until the 19th century that Swedish people began adopting fixed surnames. In fact, the first law on having to have a fixed surname didn't occur until 1901. Until this time, most people used the patronymic surnames, which comes from the father's given name or first name, and a suffix to indicate the child's gender. So for example, Anderson or Anders' daughter. The result is that the last name changes for every generation. That's the tricky news. The good news is women typically retain their maiden names throughout their whole lifetimes, which makes it much easier to find women in Swedish records than it is sometimes to find women in United States records. So just so that we understand how this works, these marriages would not have occurred in a chart like this, but I just thought it was easier to look at. So let's pretend Anders Magnusson and Maria Per's daughter have a son and daughter. They're going to take their last name from their father's first name, Anders. So they become Johan Anderson and Lotta Anders' daughter. Now, again, we're just pretending here. Now, Johan and Lotta are getting married. So they're going to take their last name from Johan. So they're Anders Johansson and Maria Johan's daughter. And so on. Okay. And then there, and while not universal, a lot of the families followed naming patterns that are outlined here. The first son is often named after the father's father, the first daughter after the mother's mother. So perhaps this is why we ended up with so many Charlottes and Charlottas in this family tree. And just a fun fact, and I think it does play out in this tree, although I'm not going to talk about it further, is that if there was a second marriage, the first child of the correct gender was commonly named for the deceased first spouse. I thought that was a bit odd. So I've underscored the importance of finding the parish name and the place name to effectively search in Swedish records. You'll recall that I got lucky from that immigration record, and I came up with two parish names, Killingaryd and Leared, both in Älvsborg County. While I didn't yet have the ort or the place name, Skrikibo and Lindesjortregarden, again, my pronunciation of these words. While I didn't have those from that immigration document, you're going to see how important those become and where I did find them. So there have been many talks, and you could give a full talk on finding the parish name and the place name. I'm just going to give you a few tips today. Family documents, sometimes obituaries, actually, even in the United States, will include the parish name where somebody came from. As you saw, I found mine in immigration records. Naturalization records will sometimes include this information. Scandinavian church records, passenger lists and ship manifests. Census records will at least give you the immigration year. So that can be helpful. And many of these types of documents that I've outlined here are currently available on both Ancestry.com and FamilySearch.org. Again, remember, I found the first immigration document that helped me on Ancestry.com. But if you've exhausted all of the resources and still haven't found the parish, don't despair. With a birth date, a name, and some patience, you may very well be able to find the parish and place once you get into the Swedish records. So now we're ready. We're ready to see what types of records are available on Archive Digital. And again, I guess I should mention that there are a lot of these Swedish records available, not in their entirety, but both on Ancestry.com, Family Search. And then the Swedish National Archives is free to anyone who wants to, and they have the full set of the documents. I just didn't find it as easy to navigate using the Swedish National Archives. So what What I like about ArchiDigital, the records are in full color. When you see the same record on Ancestry or in Family Search, it's in black and white, so it's not as easy to read. It's got a really user-friendly search engine. It usually takes me quite a while to learn anything new, and I have found this very easy to use. And I've been able to cut and paste the documents along with their citations right into Ancestry that then gets copied over into my family tree. Well,
Is there a cost for that?
there is a cost to it. And I can't tell you how much it is right now. To me, it's more than paid for itself already. It's in line with what Ancestry.com is. So there's lots of different functionality for this initial research that I've been doing. I've used primarily an index search and an archive search. The index search searches by name, basically, and you can use an advanced search that types in like a name and a birth date. Sometimes I was able to find helpful information with just a first name and a birth date. And I'm going to show you how I did that in one particular case. Again, it's really important to think creatively about the name variations. So for example, again, I'm dealing with Charlotta, Lotta, Lundberg, Niels' daughter. And in these in the Swedish documents, often the daughter or son is lopped off or abbreviated. So using wildcards or just dropping that is helpful as well. So this was a search I did where all I did was put Ida Charlotta in with her birth date, and up popped 4 different household record sets just with that basic information. And so for most of people, you're going to know at least a first name and a birth date if you're working with an immigrant. I'm not going to go over those 4 documents right now because we're going to look at them more closely in a minute. The second search function, like I said, is an archive search. Once you know the parish name, you've got access to volumes of data organized by the parish, the type of record, and the year. And here I relied mostly on vital records, birth, marriage, death, moving in and moving out records, and the household records. As I do more information, more research, I'll probably go back to especially the estate records. And apparently there's one kind of record where if somebody was jailed, that's where you'll find photos of real people. So I haven't tried to look for that yet. But so this is for the Killingaryd parish, and you'll see there's 59 volumes of data that goes back into the 1700s. So the Swedish government didn't start to keep records, vital records, birth, marriage, death, until 1950. Hence the importance of these church parish records, the Kirkeböcker. The oldest records date back to 1608, but the first national requirement for the churches to keep records was 1686. And I've seen this in most of the parishes I've been working in. General adherence goes to about 1720. So again, for this research question, I focused on the vital records and the household examination books. And this, I've just highlighted the birth and christening records for Killingaryd for the period of 1843 to 1885. And so you start to become a little familiar with some of the words because you have to look at the index. So födda, adopta for birth and christening, vigda, marriage, döda, the gravda. I guess I'm going to have to take Swedish. When I took Norwegian lessons, though, they said, because I had so much French, that I spoke Norwegian with a French accent. So I'm not so sure that's a great idea. These books are arranged by year and by parish. In this example, like I said, we're looking at the births in Killingard Parish. And the reason you want to find a birth record for your person is because that's going to give you that really, really important ort or the farm or the place or the neighborhood, the T-ticket. And you need that T-ticket in order to use the household examination books. So these are the household, and I'm not even going to try that word, the household examination books. These are an absolute treasure trove for genealogists because they actually serve as like an annual census for every person living in every place. Their original purpose was to test each member of a family's knowledge of church doctrine. But by doing this annual census, you get all of the information about where they were living, usually gives the occupation of the head of the household. It records new births, marriages, deaths, movement into or out of the parish. So so again, these are a treasure trove, but this is where you have to get beyond the Killingard down to that next level, like around here, T-ticket. And as you'll remember, I did find, or you'll see how I found Scrikivo. And so now I can go right to that place. I found having the birth dates really important, particularly because the handwriting can be very, very difficult to read. It's not just the Gothic script, it's the age of the clergyman writing in the book, the neatness of the clergyman writing in the book. As I did this research, I found that it worked best to jump back and forth between the household records and the vital records, the birth, marriage, death records, as I discovered new people and new information. So with that brief overview, let's go to Sweden. Again, this chart just outlines as a reminder of what I knew when I decided I was ready to go into the Swedish records. And again, a reminder, our research question is still, who were Ida Charlotta Lundberg's parents? Since we usually work backward when doing genealogical research, I decided to look to see if I could find Ida's record of emigration from Sweden. From her immigration record, we know that she left from the parish of Lerud in Älvsborg. So this top record in the far left came from the Moving Out book from Lerud. And this shows her on the top line, and we pick up a little bit more information. It's very hard to read. I know you can't read that from there, but we pick up the information that she left from the place Lindus Garden. She was headed to North America, and that she left this place on the 15th of March in 1883. The second document is the Swedish emigration record from the Emmy Ham database that's found on Ancestry.com. This gave us a little bit more additional information that she left from the port of Gothenburg on the 6th of April. So she left her town 15th of March, and she left from Gothenburg a couple weeks later. But this one tells me that she was headed to Manchester, New Hampshire, which made total sense because that's where other family members were. But I did learn the importance just while putting this presentation together of continuing to do research or to see if something else pops up. So the document on the far right in the handwriting is actually the ship manifest from the ship Orlando. And she was headed to Hull, England, which was a very common path to getting to America. But the surprise for me came that she was traveling with her future husband, Gottfried Anderson. and a mystery man by the name of C.E. Johansson. If you remember, one of the other documents said that she had been traveling alone. And so I suspect what happens, because I've done a little work on the other side, is that she left her village on her own, her first part of the journey, but then somewhere she met up with Gottfried and this mystery man, C.E. Johansson, to continue the journey. So again, now I have that critical piece of information about the place where she left Sweden from. Oh, my dad would not have liked that preposition at the end. Linda's Garden. So I could continue my research moving backward. We know that Ida left in 1883. So I picked the household examination book for Linda's Garden that would have contained, hopefully, her record. In the Swedish examination books, when you can probably see from there, all the names seem to be crossed out. That indicates that there was some movement. They moved out of the parish. Sometimes if a person's crossed off, it means they died. But if their name is crossed out, it means they probably moved out of the parish or they died. So they did something. So in this particular case, we find Ida. It's right here. She's with her family, and again, they're all crossed out. This is an unrelated person, probably somebody who was working on the farm. So this is the first place we see her with her family. So she's with her father, and the little abbreviation in front of his name is an abbreviation for the word farmer, Niels Lundberg, and we get his birth date and his birthplace from this record. So he was born in 1830 in a different parish called Marbach. Indicates that they moved into this Skrikibo in 1880. And that they're crossed out because this is a record that's showing that they're all leaving Skrikibo and they moved to a different parish in Sweden. Lists his wife. In this record, she's listed as Charlotta Jacob's daughter. That's the first time I've seen that, Jacob's daughter. Born June of 1822. So remember, the one that family lore said was her mother was born in 1852. But this record says Ida's mother was born in 1822. Lists a son, Johann, born in 1864. And again, our Ida Charlotta, born in November of 1862. And what this record is showing is that both Johann and Ida moved to America. Johann goes in 1886 and Ida went first in 1883. So now we've got the record that shows Ida with parents. So with this information, I decided to jump to seeing if I could find Ida's birth certificate. Because remember, again, I'm really trying to prove who Ida's parents are. That's the primary purpose of my research question. So with this information, I went to the birth records for Killingard for when she would have been born. And this is one of the prettiest documents I found that was so easy to read. Most of them have not been so easy. So from this record, we're going to find some really the critical piece of information about the place where she was born. So this record shows that she was the 38th birth of the year. It confirms the birth date that we've had all along, 17 November 1862. She was baptized the next day. It lists her parents as Niels Spenson Lundberg. That's the first time I found Spenson. So that gives us a clue about who Niels's father might be. And in this record, she is actually, the mother is listed as Charlotte Lundstedt. Again, it provides the very important information about where the family was living when Ida was born. And that's in Scrikibo. And these books are actually quite helpful. You can probably make out the 63. What that is that's a page number reference to the household examination book. So if I go to the household examination book, which we'll do for the corresponding time period, I've already got the clue that I need to look at page 63. But the other thing about this, the birth records, they don't all do this, but they often provide the age of the mother at the time the baby was born. And this clearly says she was 40. That clearly cements again 1822 as the birth year of the Charlotte Lundstedt who gave birth to Ida Charlotta. On the far right, you get some interesting information about godparents. So following the trail, I went to the archive book for the household examination book for Scrikibo for that time period. I went right to page 63. And what did I find? I found a family. Starts right at the top of that page and goes down 10 lines. I found a family, a very large family with lots of kids with 2 different last names. All this did was give me more clues, but it gave me more mystery and a little bit more information. Again, we've got Niels Svensson Lundberg as the father. We've got Charlotte Lundstedt as the mother, but this one gives me her birthplace too, which is helpful. But I've got 5 children with the last name of Johansson, and they're all born between 1845 and 1855. I've got 4 children born to the second gifted, which is indicated here, and gifted means marriage. So 2 marriages. The second marriage to Niels and Charlotta, including our Ida Charlotta, born in 1862. So it was this Charlotta, the Jacob's daughter, Lundstedt, born in 1822, who was married twice. She was married to someone, presumably by the name Johann, because the children have the last name Johansson. So at this point, I'm pretty sure I've solved the mystery of who Ida Charlotta Lundberg's parents are. I'm pretty sure they're Niels Lundberg, born in 1830, and Charlotta Lundstedt, born in 1822. But I decided to keep tracking Ida Charlotta and her family until her 1883 emigration to see what else I might be able to find. So I'm just following the Scrikibo examination books for the next period of time. And we see more movement in the family. And I know that this is impossible to read from where you're sitting, but again, I've got Niels and Charlotta with their 3 children with the same information as the previous book. And the crossed out lines are the 4 of the Johansson children. They've all moved out sometime in this time period between 1872 and 76 for other parts of Sweden. In this record, there was an interesting notation on the top of the record. It says E.G. J.O.H. period Isaacson. And what that translates to is owner Johann Isaacson. So I suspect that this is perhaps the father of all those Johansson children. And while it doesn't indicate so here, I'm also presuming that he has died. So again, continuing just to follow the family a little further, this is the same document we looked at the very beginning where Ida and her brother Johann both emigrate to the United States. And shows that her mother is and father have moved out. The top document actually shows them moving to that Lindis Yurta garden from which Ida embarks on her journey to North America. So again, while I discovered the correct parents for Ida Charlotta Lundberg, I still had all of those unanswered questions. So I wondered, could I learn a little bit more about Charlotta and Nils Lundberg? Had Charlotta been married before Nils, and who was the father of all of those Johansson children? And if that Ida Charlotta Lundstedt, who was born in 1852, wasn't my great-great-grandmother, who was she? And was she related? And so I kept digging. I'm not going to go through all of the documents to prove the very complicated relationships that I discovered. But I'm going to share a few of them with you. And I do promise that there's a chart at the end that will bring all of those complicated relationships into focus. So the first piece of the puzzle I decided was that Charlotta Lundstedt married twice. And indeed she was. She was married. This is her marriage record. Her first marriage was to Johann Isaacson on the 22nd of September, 1844. He was 37 and she was 22. So we have found the father of all of those Johansson children. So the Scrikibo household examination book of 1852 to 1856 indeed shows this Johann Isaacson with his wife, Charlotta Lundstedt, and the 5 children born between 1845 and 1855. It also, on the very far right, shows Johann's death. He died on 23 July 1855, leaving Charlotte a widow, which is, they make this very easy. They indicate now she's a widow, ENK in front of her name. And she's left with 5 children under the age of 10, including a year-old. What's really fun, and I know you can't see this, is if you look down this record, on this last line here, there's a drang, a farmer, a bachelor by the name of Nils Lundberg living on the same farm. How convenient. So this is the Charlotta that married twice. Now she's married that farmer, that bachelor from the farm, who was living nearby. They got married in 1857. She's listed as a 35-year-old widow, and he's a young whippersnapper of 27. So there were 2 marriages. There were 9 children. The ones that are the children that are of the interest in my family tree are this Isaac Edvin Johansson, born in 1850 and dying in 1918. He died in Concord, New Hampshire as well. And our Ida Charlotta Nils daughter Lundberg. And they were half siblings. So they both immigrated to the United States. They both, I believe, spent some time in Manchester, New Hampshire before moving on to the capital of Concord. So there's some half siblings. But I was still really perplexed by that other Ida Charlotta Lundstedt, the one born in 1852, who was supposed to be my great-great-grandmother. So a quick look at her records answered that question, but this is really convoluted and complex. Way back at the beginning of the presentation, I showed you her death certificate that told me that her parents' names were Loth Lundstedt and Maria Elizabeth Svensdotter. And I confirm this, this is her birth record. So now I got all those Charlottas, but now I got all these Lundstedts running around. How did Loth Lundstedt fit into this picture? In short, it turns out that Charlotta, born in 1822, my real great-great-grandmother, and Loth Lundstedt are siblings, brother and sister. So the Ida Charlotta, born in 52, is Ida Charlotta's niece. It also makes her a first cousin to all of those half siblings. And so now to the final relationship. Guess pretty common back then. But in 1874, these first cousins got married, Isaac Edmund Johansson and Ida Charlotta Lundstedt, the one born in 1852. So she was not my great-great-grandmother. She was my third cousin. And by marriage, she and her husband were my half-great-grand aunt and my half-great-grand uncle. I think you can agree with me that based on the number of family relationships, the complexity of these relations, and simply the staggering number of Charlottas, I can understand why they just said they were great-grandparents.
Never believe a post-it note.
Never believe a post-it note is the moral. That should be the moral of this presentation.
Grandmothers lie too, by the way.
Yes, yes, they do.
And grandfathers.
Yeah. So here are the two trees. The one on the far right is the one that I showed on the first screen. This is the one I started with, which turns out to be original but wrong. The one on the left is kind of an abbreviated on what I found out by doing this research work. The most important thing, which was what I was trying to set out to do, is starred. We found out who Ida's parents were, Charlotta and Nils. In the blue boxes, we show that Charlotta and Loth are siblings. In the yellow boxes, we see the half siblings, Ida Charlotta and Isaac Edvin. In the red boxes, we show that Charlotta's children, Ida Charlotta and Isaac Johansson, are first cousins with Loth's daughter, Ida Charlotta. And finally, in the green boxes, we have those two first cousins getting married. So I proved who the real parents were, but I did solve what I really wanted to know is, how was the person born in 1852 related to me? And as I said, it's a very complicated, but it is a family relationship. By doing this research, I was able to fill out lots of siblings and go many generations back, about to the 1740s, before I hit more brick walls. So the research will need to continue. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We've got two from the Zoom people.
Okay.
Do you have any sense regarding the comparative availability of records, say, between Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark?
Yes, there are equally good records, especially for Denmark and Norway. They didn't do the annual house record books, but they have corresponding documents that we would liken to a census document. And in the handout, I give a couple of, I don't think I have a copy of that here, a couple of resource books that would be very, very helpful for both the Danish and the Norwegian.
You may have answered this, but do you have any thoughts on what prompted female Ida Charlotta to leave Sweden on her own? Really on her own?
Well, I haven't been able to prove this one yet, so, I am quite confident that the immigrant Ida Charlotta Lundberg, who left, she at least knew her future husband in the old country. I suspect they too, I don't think they were first cousins, but I think they were related, but I haven't been able to figure that out. But there were other members of both families who had already immigrated. The reason, and this was very, very common too, and as I said, my people came in the third wave of immigration. They were joining people in Manchester, New Hampshire. They were not the first to come. But what I have found somewhat interesting in my tree, and I don't know if this is common, is that these two, my Ida Charlotta and her husband Gottfried Anderson, they were the only ones of many siblings who immigrated. The rest all stayed in Sweden. Well, if anybody at any point is interested in looking at what our Archive Digital offers, I'd be happy to meet you here on a Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon during the help session, or to arrange something at your convenience. Because I really have been able to find out a great deal about the side of the family where it was really even hard to go back. Well, it was really even hard to go back to my great grandparents before finding the Swedish records. Terrific. Thanks so much.
Thank you.